Hi, everybody. This is Brad Forrester. I'm CEO of JBF Consulting. And today I'm here with Jeff Coble from IBP2. And we're going to talk today about S&OP, S&OE, and what it means for transportation and logistics leaders. Jeff, if you don't mind, introduce yourself to the world.
Hey, well, thanks for having me on, Brad. My name is Jeff Coble. I'm with IBP2. I'm a senior director, and we help our clients better themselves or improve their capabilities in the S&OP and S&OE space.
Great. And for those of us, myself included, can you just give us a definition of S&OP and S&OE so that we understand what we're talking about?
Yeah, great question. So S&OP we see as the ability to facilitate cross-functional discussions, so between multiple groups. So I've got perhaps demand planning and finance and supply planning and operations. Let's all get together and come up with a single plan that we all agree to, and we agree to this one plan for the company. A lot of times we say if companies are going off, if individuals are going off on different plans, that's at great expense to the company. So if we can align on one plan, and maybe that plan's not absolutely correct, but it's a lot less expensive for that company to be incorrect together than to be incorrect independently of each other. So S&OP is really looking at a long time frame. It's usually a monthly cycle for our clients. The difference for S&OE is that many issues will come up in the speed of business that cannot be answered on a monthly cycle. I can't wait for the monthly cycle to make a determination. So S&OEs are typically weekly functions. They can be shorter. I've got a current client right now that does S&OE every day, but they're typically weekly, and it's to answer questions and use direction from S&OP to make operational decisions that are in alignment with the S&OP direction of the company.
Okay. And Jeff, is do you see the S&OP adoption, S&OE as well? Do you see that kind of isolated to specific industries, or is it broader?
No, I think any company could benefit from cross-functional. So every company's got finance, every company's got operations, every company's got planning. Let's all agree to our different plans. They've got sales. So a big aspect is to bring in sales input into what the plans are and what finance is saying, and all agree, hey, these are the recognized gaps. How are we going to address these gaps? And agree to those as well. And so it does. I think it's independent of industry. Some industries lead and are better in general at S&OP or S&OE planning, but there's very few industries that couldn't benefit from it.
Who do you think the leading industries are? Just
generally
curious.
CPG, where the margins are a little bit more narrow. The need to be organized and on a single path. Generally, the thought leadership generally comes out from CPG to other industries.
Okay. But it's applicable to most, essentially anybody that has constraints or anybody that needs to kind of match up supply demand with capacity or production capacity or logistics capacity, warehouse capacity, things that are constraining to a plan. It's really is it a process? Is it a technology? Is it a mixture of both? Like, what does S&OP look like in an enterprise?
Well, we generally think of it first as a process, but then it's enabled by technology. So at IBP2, we believe, and we didn't start out years ago. Our firm's like 16 years old. We didn't believe. We became adherents on the digitization, and now digitizing these decisions is very important. Things are so much faster. Business is so much faster, and the forcing function of really of the pandemic in 2020 has really increased. And you could almost say Amazon as well. And it's been a longer track with Amazon, but the need to make decisions and to pivot is so great that you do need some kind of technology that digitizes the information so that there's very fast flow of information, and decisions, questions and decisions can quickly be elevated and disseminated, what the
Yeah.
resolutions are.
In your experience, Jeff, does the transportation function, more broadly, the logistics function, do they have a seat at the table with regards to long range capacity planning, whether it's on the supply or the demand side, or is that still kind of like an untapped area?
It is, that's a great question, Brad. And so historically, S&OP has been about demand and supply synchronization. But as we've gotten better and matured processes and learned more about it, now that circle of concern is getting broader and broader. So a good
Mhm.
example is like now, it's very common to have HR in an S&OP discussion if you have seasonal labor forces, let's say. And we've got
Okay,
to, when are we going to ramp up? When are we going to ramp down? And what's that
sure.
look like? In the same way, logistics now, as we've learned to get better and better at synchronizing demand and supply, now we've expanded the circle of concern, and logistics is now a question that with these capabilities, not just the processes, but the digitization, we can bring in and highlight constraints that might exist in logistics.
Yeah,
A great example would be tariffs. So a lot of tariffs, and the volatility of the tariff situation over the last several months has created a, hey, what's the best way to source and then ship? And in doing so, do I have I might be able to source these items from this other location, and I might be able to get good quality there, but do I actually have the capacity on the lanes to get it to me?
right.
Or outbound. It might be an outbound situation as well. So
Yeah.
that has created, hey, we need to now start making cross-functional discussions that include logistics as a very important ingredient to maintaining the profitability of the company.
Yeah, that's a great kind of segue into some of the logistic challenges that are on the JBF side. Our clients are very challenged with the volatility, right? And no surprise that COVID was an enormous, kind of black swan event that triggered a lot of changes overnight, seemingly, to physical supply chain networks, where all of a sudden now it's like, not only do we not have capacity in these new lanes where we have to, maybe find our supply, where we can't get it from China. Now we have to get it from somewhere else. We don't even have the relationships to know if we have capacity. Can we even put this, we've got 3 containers to move. How do we do it? We don't have relationships in this region, let alone kind of the pre-booked ocean capacity. We see it as well on the parcel side, right? Where it's like you would never expect 10 years ago for any high volume parcel shipper to have capacity concerns. But, given kind of the rise of e-commerce, given Amazon effect, in terms of like the consumption of available parcel capacity and final mile capacity, all of a sudden now shippers are pivoting to, I have to have a balanced strategy. I can't just move all my parcels with FedEx or with UPS. I have to have all of them, and I need regional specialists. I have Laser Ship and all these other, kind of courier and regional companies to provide me with that capacity for final mile. So we definitely see logistics having a need for longer term forecasting, both on the primary network on the inbound side, as well as, in some cases, secondary network, final mile specifically. But we've been talking about this for 25 years. I recall having features and functions when I was in product management at Manugistics in the late 90s. We were talking about giving our TMS customers a long range forecast, and it was kind of like, it was a great feature, but nobody really used it because they said there's no point in us giving additional visibility to a transportation provider when all they want is 72 hours notice on the tender, right? That's as good as we can get. But I suspect that carriers and the transportation, the capacity providers, right, the supply side of our logistics market is now capable enough to accommodate longer range planning, right? If I'm booking kind of an annual contract here with a shipper client, and I'm expecting 5 loads per week on this specific lane, whatever it is, let's say Denver to Chicago, and all of a sudden it's 15 in 1 week and 2 in the next week. Some planning and some additional forecast visibility would really help me position my assets to make sure that I can accommodate my customer, make sure I have the right capacity there for their demands, and it's beneficial for the shipper as well, right? Presumably the contract market and kind of consistent supply is part of that equation. It's just surprising, Jeff, to not see it come into the mix and have logistics with a seat at the table or a strong opinion based on those capacity constraints.
So we we are seeing them come to the table now. We've got one client right now that is a beverage manufacturer and ships water, and that's very heavy product. And now and they have tamped down and gotten very steady state, excellent execution of demand and supply constraints from a production standpoint. And now we're expanding that circle to look at transportation lanes again to control costs, to manage volatility. They use third-party providers. They're not private fleet, so they want to be, the better partner they can be with those third-party suppliers, the better they can manage and lower their costs. And it's not just I liked your example, like, 20 years ago, we were trying to give like a 5-year picture, and that would be like one snapshot. But now it's much more like, hey, I want to give you the 18-month picture, but I'm going to give it to you every week, and I'm going to explain to you how it's modifying and how it's changing so that you can see the trends coming. You can place bets, as we would say, or decisions based on the best knowledge. So the technology has outdistanced 20 years ago, the technology outdistanced the business acumen to use it. Now, as S&OP has matured and grown, and we call it integrated business planning as well, but as those capabilities have grown, and then S&OE as an ability to consume the S&OP decisions, we can now readily expand and go into things like logistics, warehousing and transportation needs that need to be addressed.
Jeff, this brings up kind of one of the potential challenges that I would see more from a systems standpoint, right? So if I think back to some of my, let's say, traditional retailer, like a brick and mortar retailer, and they do an annual bid for transportation capacity, truckload. Their typical process is to request from merchandising or kind of the brands, what is your forecast for the next coming year in terms of SKU mix, articles, quantities. It's just a gross aggregation of a quantity of product that never necessarily gets easily boiled down into a pallet size or a box size or any type of thing that is important when we're buying capacity. We kind of want to know what the dimensions are so that we can translate a gross SKU level forecast into what does that really mean in terms of how much capacity we need. Are we there yet from a master data synchronization standpoint, or are the tools now capable within your S&OP domain to kind of translate that into something that is tangible and understandable at the transportation level?
The capability, Brad, exists. It's the interest now to get the two parties to the table and to negotiate from that. We can take a forecast, we can translate it down with data into mixed trucks. Homogeneous trucks are pretty straightforward, but mixed trucks are have been historically more difficult. But we can do that now, and it's a matter of getting the parties together and creating the Rosetta Stone to translate the demand or the supply into lanes and truckloads. And part of it is an S&OP is to give guidance as to total volume, and maybe at an S&OE what the near term mix is going to be, because there will be some variance. And I think that's more important, is that you create the steadiness and the trust between the parties that, hey, I'm going to continue to communicate and provide this information. You're going to continue to communicate back. So there's also an echo function. So it's not just a one way. Where the merchandiser is sending out a signal and wants to get a signal back. I hear you, and I can fulfill based on this information. And then, but with that, over time becomes the notion of, we understand what's in the variance, because you're never going to be absolutely accurate. It's a matter of how well I can tighten down the variance to within business tolerance.
Yeah. Forecasts are always wrong, right?
That's absolutely true. We don't believe in getting your forecasting needs to be a tool, but after you've got your forecast planed out, you really need to understand your bias, is the more statistical relevant term. That once you've done that, is to better understand that bias, and then understand what we call forecast value add. So you've got many different communications coming in providing value. Who's providing the most value? And then how to lean into that. And again, with dealing in supply chain execution, there's also knowledge to be known out there. So in a construct, what we have done historically is we've tried to do the inside the four walls supply chain. And then we've gotten good at that. And so now we want to extend to an ecosystem or an outside the four walls supply chain. And you see some software companies that specialize in that, managing that communication back and forth. And that's what we're looking to in an S&OP and an S&OE cycle, is to go outside the four walls. And it may be with our own internal logistics, or it may be an external logistics provider. But either way, we want to have a very healthy communication back and forth across demands and needs.
Yeah, that's a really interesting comment that you made there, Jeff. Not just for the shippers that manage their own freight, is this relevant, but maybe even more so if my freight is managed by a third-party logistics company. These forecasts might be very impactful, because I think in many situations we see 3PLs doing warehousing, distribution, and transportation as a package service for their customers, and some of these are our clients. I think that longer range forecasting could be very beneficial, especially for warehouse capacity planning, labor staffing planning, transportation capacity, new network planning. If we had 18 months of forecasts, we could make better decisions, I think, in the long run, right? There's not going out on a limb there, it feels like.
Well, and to your earlier statement, also getting a seat at the table. So now logistics is brought to the table to provide some of the feedback that needs to be in that cross-function discussion. So, as I mentioned at the top, S&OP is facilitating cross-functional discussion. It did not begin historically including logistics, but now, as we've expanded, it can include logistics and should include logistics, because we have the technology and we have the acumen now to do that. And it's all about managing efficiency for the client. So they want to lower their costs and make sure that they're in the right positions to have impact on revenue as well. So there's the being in position to sell, as well as selling at the lowest cost.
Yeah. Jeff, when we started talking about this several weeks ago, you had a couple horror stories, right? Where we started talking. I'm like, well, what is the worst case scenario? What can go wrong? if logistics or transportation is not part of the S&OP conversation? Where have you seen things kind of go south?
Well, I think, and we're in September. A lot of our clients that are, let's say, in the food and beverage area are ramping up for the holiday season, and this is the time
Yeah.
that they start really getting into detailed planning for that. I did have a client that was a protein manufacturer that would render protein year round, but it's very popular in the holiday seasons, and they would put into deep freeze their protein and then bring it out for quick deployment to retailers during the holiday season. And one of the they had plenty of cube for deep freezing, but they lacked door space, and so they were slowly building up the cube over the year, but they lacked the shipping door space to get all the product out in the short time frame that existed to then hit the grocery stores for the holiday season. And so their constraint became
Hmm.
shipping doors, not cube. And that was something that could be addressed and would be managed, almost as in an S&OP cycle and S&OE cycle, that
Yeah.
if it was recognized in advance, it could have been managed very easily on the
Yeah.
front end.
And yeah, that's it reminds me of my college transportation professor that said, "What is the value of a Christmas tree on December 26th? It's a
Exactly.
whole lot less valuable than a Christmas tree delivered to the right place at the right time on maybe December 23rd." Right? So is there is there a value proposition to be made? Like, do you see clients on your side that are implementing S&OP technology, process, tactics, et cetera? What types of benefits are they seeing?
Oh, well, uh, everybody comes at it differently, but usually, with a good focus on it, 1 to 3% improvement is in COGS is not unusual.
Okay.
And where that contribution comes from is, depends on the current situation, but
Sure.
certainly a big red flag that you probably need to work on planning is premium freight. So if you have your steady freight, but then you start seeing premium freight creeping up, that's a good sign that the volatility of the business that you're in is outpacing your ability to plan it accurately.
Plan. Yeah, that's a great call out, right? So if you find yourself in you're a logistics professional, if you find yourself expediting or choosing premium freight modes, whether it could be a team driver, a dedicated load, air freight, air express types of shipments. Those are maybe first clues that perhaps better planning
Oh yeah.
could prevent that, and there's certainly tangible dollars there in terms of premium freight reduction. Yeah, that's a very good call out. Um, I would also suspect that there's tremendous savings to be captured, especially if we're looking at a heavy import network, especially with today's tariff environment and the frequent sudden changes of direction in terms of physical supply chain sourcing of those import networks create huge gaps in terms of capacity relationships with the right kind of carriers or freight forwarders, trading partners, what have you. um, Maybe better planning could help that too at some level, even though if it's a new tariff or a new country that is being hit, in terms of tariffs, we have to pivot in a week. That doesn't give us a great amount of time to plan for anybody, right? But I think seemingly, if you're importing, that could be also a good mix for, or a good use case for S&OP.
Well, you bring up a good point. What's happening like in the tariff market is hard to predict. So rather than be able to predict it, the other thing, another aspect of S&OP planning is to have agility, is to recognize where you lack agility and then to address those. And maybe that's not managed directly in an S&OP setting, but it's recognized in an S&OP setting, and then you implement transformations that allow you to be more agile, and you find ways to address issues like that. Now, what really drove that, it wasn't so much the pandemic, it was the Russia-Ukrainian battle, because so many natural resources became locked up in
Right.
Ukraine,
Like the
and a
wheat,
lot
the
of people had to
food.
start. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it wasn't directly to the U.S., but geographies close to the U.S. soaked up other capacity, and so it indirectly impacted us here in the U.S. But it was a global incident. We have global supply chains, so interruptions like that, and that was very significant to planning and finding out that we had fragile supply chains, and we needed to
Yeah.
develop agility and resilience. And those are also aspects that we measure in an S&OP cycle: is what is our resilience. So I may have contracts, let's say for set lanes, but do I have contracts for just in case lanes?
Right.
That kind of, do I have a contingency? So there
Yeah.
is a certain amount of supply chain risk, and that's what we really measure in an S&OP discussion is risks and opportunities. And those are the kind of discussions that come up, and how are we mitigating the risks and taking advantage of the opportunities.
Yeah.
And now, and it became clear that logistics was very much an important, vital element to whether we were going to be successful or not, because we've created these global supply chains, which is great and goodness, and we should. But when geopolitical incidents occur, do we have the agility or resilience to keep things going and minimize the impact that's coming from
Yeah.
them?
Jeff, you mentioned, we both have mentioned or touched on the technology aspects of this a couple times. We were just at an Oracle conference just a few short weeks ago, and they're kind of releasing some additional forecasting capabilities on their transportation platform, OTM. We also know that there are other kind of tier one TMS providers out there, like E2Open also has kind of a transportation forecasting tool. They're certainly useful in terms of aggregating data to help a shipper on the transportation side prepare for like an annual bid, or procuring and sourcing capacity and locking things down on the contract market. Um, what types of technologies are you using on the S&OP side that are kind of like pure play? What do you see as like the top technology that's out there?
Well, in the pure S&OP, it's actually a very small field. There's
Okay.
not a lot of choices there, but there are what we call the tactical tools, which are the demand and supply planning that do the synchronization.
Sure.
And they're the typical. You mentioned Manugistics earlier, which is now Blue
Blue
Yonder.
Yonder. Yep.
Oracle has a Oracle Supply Chain Cloud, and SAP, Kinaxis,
Hmm.
O9, as well as, and those are generally like the really big players uh, in the Gartner quadrant, we'll say. But there are other very good tools that are out there that we work with quite a bit, that do the tactical. There's very few that do the real strategic, over the top information, or provide knowledge very rapidly for it. But you do have to have the tactical tools to make use of the strategic tools. And
Right.
then we're seeing, AI's everywhere. It's gonna be a pivot point in everybody's life. It'll be like the introduction of smartphones in the first decade of the century. Um, It'll be similar to that, and we'll have a pivot point as well. And we're seeing so many new applications to fill in data needs, and to address applications and provide knowledge. It still doesn't, you still need a human to make decisions, but it does add speed and accelerate the decision making.
Yeah, it does seem like a really good use case for machine learning, right? Especially if we're looking at huge data sets, right? Of like sales data, demand data, supply data, and finding the trends, determining decisions that were made historically, and kind of compartmentalizing those, and kind of building that into some sort of model of replication for maybe agentic AI down the road, in terms of highlighting risks, highlighting imbalances of supply demand, highlighting areas of potential risk or need for logistics capacity, right? I think there's some AI is there's no shortage of compelling use cases here for both AI and machine learning, especially given enterprise data sets. They're huge and unwieldy, and these are very traditionally siloed types of kind of functions within an enterprise that, S&OP seems to be breaking down, right?
Yep.
We need to come to the table, multidiscipline. I was amazed to hear that HR, but it makes total sense, right? If labor is a key constraint or a key, facet of the way that you execute business, generate revenue, or control costs, or ensure that your product gets to the customer at the right place at the right time, then they should have a seat at the table in that S&OP conversation. So that was a cool learning.
Yeah, well, another aspect of the AI, so everything you said there was great, but one of the things we're learning about it is that AI is a little bit more forgiving in data gaps. So as you're using large data, and the more legacy traditional systems will stop at a data gap, but AI
Yeah.
will come in and say, you know what, I'm going to use some outside information here
Yeah.
and fill this in and make some
Right.
interpretations for it. I'm not gonna stop and stub my toe on it. I'm gonna keep going
Right.
and come up with some answers, and then highlight those back to my knowledge workers so that they can fix these things as I'm going through it. But in general, it doesn't quit on it.
That's great. Yeah. um, Jeff, this has been a great conversation, and I hope that people comment. We will certainly follow up with any questions that people ask here on LinkedIn. Any parting comments, Jeff? Any closing thoughts here?
Well, I want to thank you for inviting us to this discussion. I appreciate the invitation, and if anybody watching out there is interested in how they can enhance their S&OP or S&OE processes, and specifically around logistics, we'd love to talk to you and investigate. Everybody's situation is unique, but and we're always learning, so it'd be great to hear from you.
Yeah, and likewise, if you're a shipper in the transportation function, and you want to know how you can get a seat at that table and what it might do for you, just reach out. We're certainly happy to help you figure that out. For people that leave comments and questions, we will circle back. We'll probably have a best practices guide to provide, and make sure that we can be in a position to help make this a reality. So let's get logistics a seat at the table with S&OP, and hopefully everybody learned a little something additional about planning and sales and operations planning and execution. So Jeff, thank you for the time. Say hi to my buddy Bill Nienberg, and thanks a lot for everybody's time today.
All right, thank you.